The universe is 13.8 billion years old. In that time, stars have formed and died, and formed again across hundreds of billions of galaxies. The ingredients for life, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, water, have been scattered across the cosmos by supernova explosions for billions of years before Earth existed. The conditions for chemistry, for biology, for the slow accumulation of complexity that eventually produces a mind capable of asking questions. Those conditions have existed in countless places for billions of years longer than we have. By every statistical measure, the universe should be full of civilizations. Not just possible civilizations, advanced ones. Civilizations that have had billions of years more than us to develop, to expand, to leave traces. Civilizations so far ahead of us technologically that the gap between their capability and ours would make the gap between us and bacteria look small. And yet, silence. Complete, absolute, universal silence. No signal, no structure, no megastructure visible in any galaxy we have observed. No artifact, no transmission, no evidence of any kind that anything intelligent has ever existed anywhere in the universe, except here on this small planet, orbiting an unremarkable star in an unremarkable corner of an unremarkable galaxy. We have explored this silence before on this channel. We have talked about the dark forest, the idea that every civilization eventually learns to hide, because revealing yourself in a universe of finite resources and unknowable intentions is an existential risk. That is one explanation for the silence, a deeply unsettling one. But today, we are going to follow a different explanation. One that is older than the dark forest theory. One that is in some ways more disturbing, because it doesn't require other civilizations to be hostile or afraid. It requires them to simply be gone. The Great Filter. The idea that somewhere between the formation of a planet and the development of a civilization capable of making itself known across interstellar distances, there is a threshold, a bottleneck, a filter so lethal that almost nothing gets through it. A step in the development of intelligent life that is so difficult, so dangerous, or so self-destructive that the vast majority of civilizations that ever existed never made it past. The Great Filter explains the silence without requiring malevolence. It doesn't need other civilizations to be hiding. It doesn't need the universe to be hostile. It just needs one step in the long chain from chemistry to civilization to be almost impossible to survive. And the silence of the universe, the complete, universal, unbroken silence across 13.8 billion years and hundreds of billions of galaxies, suggests that such a step exists somewhere for everyone. The question that determines everything, the question that is arguably the most important question in human history, is whether that step is behind us or ahead of us. Let's build the argument carefully, because the answer changes everything about what the silence means, and about what it means for us specifically. The concept of the Great Filter was developed by economist Robin Hanson in 1998. It begins with a simple observation. The universe is old enough and large enough that if civilizations commonly develop to the point of interstellar presence, the galaxy should already be colonized. Not partially colonized, completely colonized. A civilization with a billion-year head, start, and exponential expansion capability could colonize the entire Milky Way in a cosmologically trivial amount of time. Millions of years rather than billions, even at speeds far below the speed of light. Even with conservative assumptions about expansion rates, the galaxy is not colonized. The universe shows no sign of being colonized anywhere we can observe, which means civilizations capable of interstellar presence either do not exist or something prevents them from reaching that stage. Something stops almost everything before it gets there. that something is the great filter. Now here is the crucial question. Where is it? There are two possibilities, and they are almost perfectly opposed in their implications. The first possibility is that the great filter is behind us, that it exists somewhere in the long chain of steps between a planet forming and an intelligent technological civilization emerging on it. Perhaps the origin of life itself is the filter. The jump from chemistry to biology, from non-living molecules to self-replicating structures capable of evolution, is so extraordinarily improbable that it has only happened once or a handful of times in the observable universe. Perhaps the development of complex multicellular life is the filter, the jump from single-celled organisms to the kind of biological complexity that eventually produces nervous systems and intelligence. Perhaps the development of human-level general intelligence is the filter, something about the specific cognitive architecture required for abstract reasoning, language, and technological development is so unlikely that it almost never happens. If the great filter is behind us, if we are already through the hard part, then the future is open. We may be genuinely rare, perhaps unique. The silence of the universe is not a warning. It is a consequence of how difficult it is to get to where we already are. And from here, if we are careful, the cosmos is ours. The second possibility is that the great filter is ahead of us, that the hard part is not getting to where we are, but surviving what comes after. That something about the development of technological civilization, something that every sufficiently advanced species eventually encounters after reaching our level, is almost universally fatal. That the silence of the universe is not evidence of how rare we are. It is evidence of how consistently civilizations like us end. This second possibility is the one that should keep you awake at night. Because if the great filter is ahead of us, it has a specific location. It is not in our past. It is in our future, probably our near future. And the evidence for where it might be located is not abstract or theoretical. It is already visible in what we are building. Look at the last 100 years of human technological development. In 1905, we did not have nuclear weapons. In 1945, we did, and we used them twice within days of completing the first test. In less than 40 years, from the first controlled nuclear reaction to the peak of the Cold War, we had built enough nuclear warheads to end human civilization many times over. The technology that could end us was developed and deployed faster than any wisdom about how to manage it could keep pace. That pattern, capability racing ahead of wisdom, technology developing faster than the judgment required to use it safely, is not unique to nuclear weapons. It is the defining feature of every major technological development of the last century. Biological engineering. We now have tools like CRISPR that allow precise modification of genetic code. Tools that could in principle be used to produce pathogens of unprecedented lethality. Tools that are becoming cheaper, more accessible, and more powerful every year. Tools that do not require a nation-state to deploy. That could in principle be used by a single individual with sufficient knowledge and motivation. The barrier between knowing how to build something catastrophic and actually building it has never been lower in human history. Artificial intelligence. We are developing systems of rapidly increasing capability, whose long-term behavior we cannot fully predict or control. Systems that are already exceeding human performance across an expanding range of cognitive tasks. Systems that may within decades reach and then rapidly surpass human-level general intelligence across all domains simultaneously. The question of what happens when a system significantly more intelligent than any human is optimizing for objectives that are not perfectly aligned with human values. And survival is not a science fiction scenario. It is a problem that some of the most serious researchers in the field consider the most important technical challenge of the coming century, and it is a problem that has no guaranteed solution. Climate systems. In a single century of industrial activity, we have measurably altered the chemistry of the atmosphere, the temperature of the oceans, and the stability of systems that took millions of years to reach equilibrium. The full consequences of that alteration will unfold over the coming centuries. The trajectory is not entirely in our control, and the civilizations most vulnerable to the consequences are not always the ones most responsible for the cause. The pattern across all of these is the same. A species develops technology faster than it develops. The wisdom, the governance, the cooperation, and the restraint required to manage that technology safely. And the gap between capability and wisdom grows with each technological generation rather than closing. If this pattern is universal, if every sufficiently advanced civilization eventually develops technologies powerful enough to end them faster than they develop the wisdom to prevent that ending, then the Great Filter is not a specific event. It is a phase, a transition period in the development of every technological civilization, during which the tools they have built become capable of destroying them, and the question becomes whether they can navigate that transition without doing so. Most, the silence suggests, cannot. But here is where this video takes a turn that no previous Cosmora video has taken, because there is a feature of our situation that may be genuinely unprecedented in the history of the cosmos. Something that no civilization before us, if any existed and failed, possessed at the moment they were approaching the filter. We can see it coming. We have developed the scientific framework, the understanding of cosmology, the Fermi Paradox, the Great Filter hypothesis, that allows us to look at the silence of the universe and understand what it implies. We can look at our own technological trajectory and recognize the pattern. We can read the absence of other civilizations as a warning rather than as a mystery. We can understand with reasonable confidence that we are approaching a threshold that almost nothing survives. No previous civilization that encountered the Great Filter had this. They did not have hundreds of years of astronomical observation establishing the silence of the universe. They did not have the scientific framework to interpret that silence as meaningful. They did not have the concept of a Great Filter to recognize what they were approaching. They built their technologies and they crossed their threshold without understanding what the threshold was. We understand what it is. We can name it. We can describe it. We can point at the specific technologies, the nuclear arsenals, the biological engineering tools, the artificial intelligence systems that represent our approach to it. And this changes something. Not everything. Not automatically. Not inevitably. But something. A civilization that can see the filter coming has something no previous civilization had. The possibility of choice. The possibility of deliberate navigation rather than blind crossing. The possibility of building the wisdom, the governance structures, the international cooperation, the alignment research, the restraint, the tools that match the power of the technologies being developed rather than lagging decades behind them. Whether we use that possibility is not guaranteed. The history of human civilization does not make the outcome obvious. We have had the concept of nuclear risk for 80 years, and we still maintain arsenals capable of ending civilization many times over. We are developing increasingly powerful artificial intelligence systems faster than we are developing the safety frameworks required to ensure their alignment with human values. The gap between capability and wisdom has not reliably closed across the technologies that most clearly represent our approach to the filter. But the possibility exists, and it is a possibility that may be genuinely new in the history of the universe. Some researchers who study existential risk, the academic field that takes the Great Filter hypothesis seriously and tries to understand which specific risks represent our approach to it, argue that the next 100 years are the most consequential in the history of human civilization, not because of what we might achieve, but because of what we might survive. The decisions made in the next several generations about how to develop and govern the most powerful technologies humanity has ever created will determine whether we are one of the civilizations that made it through the filter or one of the civilizations that didn't. That is not a comfortable thought, but it is an honest one. The universe has been running this experiment across hundreds of billions of galaxies for 13.8 billion years. The results are in. The silence is the result. Almost nothing gets through. Almost everything that reaches the technological threshold we are currently crossing fails to survive it. But almost nothing is not nothing. The filter is not absolute. It does not say no civilization has ever survived. It says almost none have. And the difference between almost none and none is the space where the future lives. If you are the kind of person who finds that the most important questions are not the ones about the cosmos, but the ones about what we do with what the cosmos is telling us. If the science that matters most to you is the science that has consequences for how we live and what we build and what we choose, then Cosmora is exactly where those questions live. Subscribe and stay. The catalog goes deeper from here. But before we close, here's the thought that belongs to you now. Every civilization that encountered the Great Filter before us, if any did, went into it without knowing what it was. Without the framework to understand the silence of the universe as a warning. Without the ability to look at their own technological trajectory and recognize the pattern. They built their technologies and they approached their threshold in the dark. We are approaching ours in the light. We know what the silence means. We know what the filter is. We know which technologies represent our approach to it. We know that almost nothing survives the transition we are currently beginning. What we do not know, what the universe cannot tell us, and what no equation can calculate, is whether knowing changes anything. Whether being the first civilization to see the filter coming is an advantage, or simply a more complete understanding of what is about to happen. Whether the awareness is a tool or just a eulogy written in advance. That question does not belong to physics. It does not belong to cosmology. It does not belong to any scientific framework that has ever been developed. It belongs to us. To the choices made by this civilization in the next 100 years. To the decisions made by the people alive right now about what to build and how to govern it, and whether the wisdom can keep pace with the capability for the first time in the history of the universe. The silence of the cosmos is waiting for the answer. And for the first time in 13.8 billion years, something is in a position to give one.